This is the Walk and Talk weekend recap. We got to talk Janibek, we got to talk Tim Tszyu, we got to talk Misfit Boxing. But let's start off with Janibek, who is now the unified middleweight champ of the world. And he did it against the German Italian monster. And of course, I say that jokingly. That he did it against a guy that probably shouldn't have been champion, right? Probably did it against a guy that wasn't even, I don't believe, top 10 in the division, in a weak division. So the belts don't really mean much. This is why I always say belts don't mean much. And you know that I'm a Janibek guy. But even for Janibek, I can't lie to you and say the belts mean something. They don't, right? It depends on who you get them off of, right? The champ makes the belt, not the belt makes the champ. And with Janibek, he has to go this way, though. It's not like Janibek's dodging any names, or it's not like Janibek is taking the easy fights. He's just kind of taking the fights that make sense to him to build him up to get a noteworthy name. He's in a real interesting situation where there's no one the Top Rank has that's an interesting fight for him. And he's not a big enough name to really garner enough interest to get a guy to cross the street to fight him. And there's not really enough interest to bring him across the street to fight someone. So now what he has to do is collect belts. He has to collect all the belts so people would make sense for them to fight him. Right? It makes sense. It makes some kind of financial sense. It would have some name to it, have some buzz to it. That's what he's doing. So he has to go down this order to do things. I think Janibek, I said a ways back now, it's kind of infamous now on boxing Twitter, that I thought he was the best middleweight in the world. He just had to prove it, right? It was potential he was the best middleweight in the world, just needed to prove it in the ring. I think that we're closer to that statement being true than ever, right? But is he really ever going to get that opportunity? That's the part you have to see. You have to see what Top Rank really does with him. But they are taking attempts to make it interesting with him. They are doing things to get him in position, right, to do that. And there's going to be a lot of boogeyman claims. There's going to be a lot of things where, oh, no one will fight him. But the truth is, there's just not enough money to fight him. He's not a well enough name, and he needs to build buzz. So the only way to build buzz is by keep knocking out cans, keep collecting belts, and then hopefully you get a guy. Because really, I mean, even in the middleweight division, what's the best name he could possibly get right now? It's like Adames. Lighty Garcia is coming, but I think he's just a little bit too young to really make that move. But that fight will be there. But I think Adames is the name. I don't think Charles is coming back. The middleweight division is weird. I think there's a lot of guys from 154 that are going to soon come up, so it'll get a little more interesting. But he's really need to get these bouts to get really the names he wants, or the interest he wants, or at least some interest in his fights. Like I said, he's going to keep knocking out cans until we get to that position, keep collecting belts until we get to that position. Let's talk Tim Tszyu. Now, Tim Tszyu, I thought, showed something. I thought every time Tim Tszyu fights, I think he gets better. I think every time Tim Tszyu fights, he grows as a fighter. I like everything Tim Tszyu says. I like the opponents he chooses. I like the people he calls out. I like his mentality as a fighter. And I really like what he does in the ring. I think I'm one of the people that really believed in him when he came over here in the States. Even though when he got dropped, I thought people overrated the Gausha that he got dropped against him and thought, oh, this guy's no good. He got dropped with Gausha, who Gausha could actually crack. Gausha's actually, knows what he's doing in the ring. And Gausha's not going to be a guy that beats top guys, but he can make stuff interesting, right? He's that kind of guy. And also, I think Tim Tszyu was a little bit nervous coming in, fighting in the States the first time, and really wanted to make an impact. I became aggressive there and walked into something. But from that point on, from the knockdown on, actually, he's dominated. And he's shown growth, and he's shown skill. And I don't think people wanted to see it at first. I think people kind of overlooked it. I think people thought that he's just someone's son. He's someone made famous in Australia who doesn't have some kind of like legendary boxing depth and like high class, and they don't have top prospects. So it's like, is this guy just overblown, right? And I don't think anyone thought he really had a chance against Charlo. And maybe people still don't think he had a chance against Charlo. But I think every time he fights, he inches closer to that being a very, very good fight. He has shown a lot of craft to me. I think he's shown that he has very good timing. I think he's shown that he has defensive awareness, whether he has the best defense or not. He has defensive awareness. And when I show maturity, he has patience in this fight that he would win a round and then Mendoza would take back a round. And Mendoza would take it back. I didn't think by, great skill or great strategy. I just thought by work rate. I thought Mendoza would lose a round and he was so tough that he would say, I'm going to get this one back. And he would just outwork Tszyu. And Tszyu was just patient, right? Maybe at points you could thought maybe he could really go for it, right? Really push it a little bit more. But he was just gonna stay patient. He just stayed patient the whole night because he truly believed in what he was doing. He truly believed the class was gonna improve over time. And that's another level as a fighter, right? Another level of fighter is being able to stay patient and know that it's a long fight and know that it's going to take rounds and you might have to give some rounds away, but eventually your game plan is going to pay off. And the top guys do that. And that's what he did. He, to me, graduated to a whole other class of a fighter. I think it was genius to still call out Jermell. I think a lot of people think, oh, maybe some people would think, oh, Jermell needs to get a win back, needs to build a buzz back. I still think him and Jermell's a big fight. And Jermell, the coming off Canelo fight, Jermell that now is a more known fighter than ever fighting Canelo, even though it wasn't a good performance, he's still more known than ever, right? Now him versus Tszyu, probably in people's mind is way more closer than ever. And I think correctly, but I don't think it's because they think Tszyu is suddenly getting better. I think they think that less of maybe Jermell. So suddenly now people think that's a really competitive fight. Now it's a really debatable fight. Another thing that generates big buzz for a fight. You already know that Tszyu has his audience, right? From where he's from, Australia. Jermell has an audience. Now you combine them together and you got two audiences. You have a fight that people deem competitive. You have a guy that's coming off of a fight with the biggest star in boxing. And you have a guy that's building himself up. I think there's good things there. He also called out Crawford and even threw in Canelo in there. I like everything he's throwing out there. The way he's trying to attack it, I think it's great. I think he's a very good fighter. I love the way he was picking his shots. I love the way he was killing Mendoza with just forward with range pressure. I love all the things he did. I thought it was a great fight, great performance for him, and it was a guy that it's not gonna be like some great name on his resume, but at this moment wasn't exactly a cakewalk, and it was a guy coming off a big win, so it was perfect. Everything was perfect. Matchmaking was perfect. Performance was perfect in my opinion, and everybody called out was perfect. So now the next step to him is like, do you go straight to the Charlo fight? Does the Charlo fight actually happen because Charlo comes down? Can you maybe get Crawford up to fight Tszyu, right? Or is Tszyu go with maybe a guy like Fundora, right? Or Lubin. There's a lot of options for him. It's in a real good spot. And if Charlo doesn't come down, he suddenly becomes like the man of the division. Let's see how that plays forward. Let's end it with Misfits Boxing. Maybe people don't want to talk Misfits Boxing. Maybe people were disappointed by the card. I thought it was a good card. I thought that what they needed to deliver, it did deliver. Now, it did a lot of the things that happen in big boxing fights. There's also some wrestling, I think, similarities to it. Now, I thought the undercard delivered. I thought the undercard did everything it needed to do, right? If you were bringing people in and they were going to watch the event from the beginning to the end, they weren't going to just watch the main event, they were going to watch the whole card. And I think that's what Misfit really tries to push. It's like, it's not just the main event for us. It's a whole card. It's a whole event that we're doing for you. The undercard delivered. You had Slim making a comeback against Salt Poppy to get the knockout, a vicious stoppage, right? You had Dean the Great coming back and dominating the rematch versus Shark, and then struggling, and then surviving the injury to his shoulder, and Shark coming back and showing nothing but heart, showing good ability to push forward and finishing very strong to still keep his name relevant. Because I think those two guys are probably the two best guys in influencer boxing, right? In crossover boxing. Those might be the two best guys. And Dean the Great might be the best guy. And this guy who's number 2, I don't know another guy's going to beat him. So I thought they still left roses, both of them. You had my mate Nate, who had a good performance. You had the tag team that it was very interesting. Even Pineda, who's like I said, he's a boxing, in pro boxing he's a can, but here he's real tough and experienced. He got dropped by Alex Wasabi. Like, it was a really competitive tag team match with good strategy. It showed that what the tag team could be as people get used to it, and strategy is going to go along and all those things. It has really potential. It's not just some gimmick, right? It's not something that's surprisingly gimmick. Like, it still makes for interesting moments in the fight. Then you got to the main fights, right? The two main events. Now, I thought the biggest disappointment of the night, and probably everybody's gonna agree, is the Dillon Danis, right? I think that Dillon Danis, his mentality was never to win. His mentality was to survive. His mentality was just to have little moments that you could take like a snapshot of, put it on Twitter, and be like, I did this with no experience, I can't punch, whatever, all these things. And you know what? It was kind of gonna go that way. I honestly thought, like, if he goes the decision just the way it's going, it'll be like, hey, he lost, but you could just always play that. I just learned how to punch 2 weeks ago, which he kind of did. He's never been known for a puncher. He's a jiu-jitsu guy, so He could be like, this guy didn't really land much on me. He kind of ran for me the whole night because Logan Paul, just be honest, moved backwards most of the night. Even if you want to say Dylan Dennis didn't punch or anything like that, it was really Logan Paul moving backwards. So I thought that really could have ended with Logan Paul had a punching bag in front of him and he ran for it all night. He didn't work it enough. Where Dylan Dennis screwed up is in the last round, he threw all his chips in and he went for a takedown. And he got in deep. He got in deep with that takedown. And Logan Paul stuffed it. And then he went for an armbar because he realized that he needed to land that takedown to keep the storyline where he wanted to keep it. He realized that I needed to land that takedown to get the storyline where I wanted to be. He didn't get that. So then he goes for a submission. He tries to go for an armbar. And Logan Paul stuffs it and attempts a hammer fist. It looks like it landed or it didn't land, but just the whole image was, okay, well, this guy even tried to cheat, use his game in the whole real fight thing that people throw out there. And it still came up short. It still looked like he was that Logan Paul was superior to him. So to me, the storyline was gonna be all right. It wasn't gonna be great. It wasn't gonna be anything, but at least he could have been like, hey, I landed here and there. He didn't do anything to me. But when he tried to cheat and he tried to get the takedown and everything and that got stuff, then he lost everything because then he lost every aspect of the fight. He got outboxed. He got out grappled. And he tried to cheat and still came up short. And he got DQ'd. And I'm interested to see what happens with his money. So I thought that was a huge disappointment. That was a huge disappointment for Logan Paul, who can't box, right? He's a sample of a guy that's athletic, and you see these athletes and you say, oh, if only they dedicated their life to boxing. Logan Paul is athletic. Go watch him on WWE. Look at the stuff he does. Naturally athletic. Good wrestler. Good high school wrestler. Got to college, right, as a wrestler. You see him compete with like the MMA guys when he goes trains with them. That's an athlete, right? When he goes to grappling, he can't box because there's guys that are athletes, but there's guys that are athletes for fighting. And athlete for fighting is completely different. His brother Jake Paul is a better fighter than him because he's more of an athlete for fighting. Probably can't do all the things that Logan Paul could do in the wrestling ring, but he could fight with these hands and move with these hands and do things that Logan Paul just can't do. Logan Paul is no good at boxing. And I do think there's a mentality thing with him that's not all there for boxing either as well. I think he's timid, afraid, and doesn't like when it gets rough. Move past that fight. I got that disappointed. Now you get to the KSI, Tommy Fury. And you have to remember that in big fights, right, when there's big names involved, it's almost as if it doesn't matter if it's a good or bad fight because the names involved are what keeping you interested. And it kind of reminds me of when you go, like I said, they're similar to boxing, right? And what the end result was very similar to how boxing goes. But as far as what this was, it kind of reminded me of like you see WrestleMania and you got all these young up and coming wrestlers and they have all these matches before the main event. They're doing so many highlights and so competitive and they're telling a great story and they're great matches and the crowd loves them. Right? But they're the undercard. And then you get to the main event and you might have, the main event's just going to be the names. And the names might be, Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair. And Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair might be 55 and 60 years old at that point. But they're the main event. And they're not going to put on as good of a match as the guys that put on the first fight of the night or the second fight of the night. And they're not going to be able to do those moves. But because they're the names, they're still going to be in the main event because they're going to put people in the seats. So you're not going to get the match, but you're going to get the star power. But that's what you got with KSI and Tommy Fury. You didn't get the match that you were getting before. You got the star power. And it didn't really matter that it wasn't a good fight because it wasn't a good fight. It was a horrible fight. And it was a horrible fight because the skill level wasn't high. And there was things that they were both doing in there. There were huge mistakes that they weren't skilled enough to capitalize on. And there were things they were doing in there that shouldn't have been as effective as it was, but was effective because they weren't skilled enough to stop it. But because it was close, because it was competitive, and because they're two big names, it still was a success. Because at the point of that, where there's just two names, you're kind of just involved and invested, right, on just what the result's going to be. Sometimes you get to the Super Bowl, right? The most important thing to get to the Super Bowl is just who won it. It's not really, oh, that was the best game ever. No, if you're rooting for one team and not rooting for the other, it's kind of like who just pulls this out. That's all I'm watching for, just to make sure that the team I want to win wins. And that's what kind of what that turned into. It was like, can KSI truly pull this off? All the fans of KSI were like, this guy who just started boxing, who just completely committed to boxing, but just started, and a guy like Tommy Fury who kind of grew up with it, kind of has all the advantages to train with the top gyms, with top fighters, his brother's a fighter, like all these things. And the fight was close. It was like, can KSI actually pull this off? It wasn't even to the point where the fight was good anymore, right? Now, to boxing fans who don't care about these guys' celebrity, I'm sure they hated it, right? I'm sure it was a terrible thing to watch. Because I'm with you as far as the skill and what it looked like. Yes, I'm with you. But as far as fans of KSI, I'm sure they were on the edge of their seat the whole night, seeing if he could pull it off. And by that, it was a success. Now, the decision, great decision. Judges nailed it. All three of them, apparently. They all had Tommy Fury winning. And he did win the fight. Now, was it tight? Yes. Is it a moral victory for KSI? Definitely. Is it a moral loss for Tommy Fury? Definitely. But Tommy Fury won the fight. But like boxing, any close fight we have, it must be a robbery. And why did so many people score for KSI? When I think it was correct, it should have been correctly scored for Tommy Fury. Because KSI was never supposed to be in this fight. And the fact that it was competitive means KSI was outperforming what most people thought. And when you outperform what most people thought, a lot of people end up giving you those rounds, right? So just because this fight was close, people probably felt that KSI pulled it out because it should have been, in their mind, they should have been really wide. And maybe they're correct as far as what Tommy should have been able to do in there, but it doesn't matter what he should have been able to do in there. It doesn't matter one guy's low skill level and his outperforming. None of that matters. When you score a fight, you just score a fight. Tommy won the fight, even though he lost the point. He lost the first 2 rounds, that was it. He won all the rounds after that. KSI gassed out. KSI did the same move over and over again. And although it was effective, but when you're slower with it, it was a lot less effective. And he was losing himself. And he needed to change ranges with it and do a lot of things that could have maybe made it more interesting. But Tommy won the fight. And Tommy goes on to say that he was done with crossover boxing or influencer boxing and all that. Tommy needs a mirror at home. That's what I say about fighters that don't realize who they are. Tommy Fury is an influencer boxer. He's not a pro boxer. You don't want to go back to fighting guys who are 0-5 and no one gives a damn about. Keep finding these names. You should be asking for a KSI rematch. You should be asking for Jake Paul. You should be asking for Logan Paul. You should be asking for Mike Perry. You should be asking for Anthony Taylor, honestly. This is a blessing, Tommy. This is a blessing for your career because without this, there isn't a career. That's the honest truth. What happened was you should have looked in the mirror and you should know now, and your team should know now, this is where you're at. This is the skill level you're at. But let's embrace it. Let's go in, let's still play that we're the pro boxer in the influencer game. Let's play that up. We're the name. But I'm going to keep finding influencers because they're tough fights, but they're winnable fights, and they're big money fights. It's a blessing. Get a better mirror, Tommy. This has been the weekend recap for the Ezra Walk and Talk. Deuces.